Hi, I'm Jason. I am the HR lead at Payroll Services PeopleWorks. I appreciate you joining me today. Today we're going to go over all the ins and outs of how to correctly hire and manage your underage employees, whether your business is in DC, Maryland, or Virginia. So to start off, we're going to cover some of the important topics that we're going to go over. Broken down into 4 sections. Just how each state breaks down their regulations for minors into 2 different age groups. That's also how we are going to navigate through this discussion. So starting off with 14 and 15-year-old minors. This group of employees generally has the most restrictions. They are required to have the fewest hours of work to allow them to have ample time for school, studying, homework, extracurricular activities, and other things like that. For 16 and 17-year-old employees, these restrictions do lessen a bit, although the restrictions are still in place to ensure that the students have ample time for their school activities and other related activities. You'll see later, this is a little different in Virginia. We're also going to cover the concept of work permits. All 3 states do require some form of work permit, although they are called different things and acquired differently in all 3 states. So we will go over what is required for each work permit in each state. And then finally, the last thing we're going to cover as a main topic are restricted professions. These are the same across all 3 states. These are following federal guidelines for employing minors. So minors under 16 are not allowed to work in any job where they would be operating or assisting with any sort of electrically powered machinery. Minors under 18 are able to work in those professions, but they are not able to work any jobs where they are operating any freight or non-automatic heavy machinery in a construction or excavation environment. So our first topic is going to be discussing the restrictions for hiring and employing 14, 15-year-old minors in your business. We'll start off with Maryland. As you can see here, all 3 states for 14 and 15-year-olds require some form of work permit. And as I mentioned earlier, we will discuss these different work permits at the end. But for Maryland, they have their regulations for employing minors broken down based on what time of the year is it. So for minors during the school year, they are allowed to work a maximum of 3 hours per day, maximum of 18 hours per week, and no more than 6 days in every week. During times when they are out of school, so during winter breaks, summer breaks, any other time that schools may be out, these minors are allowed to work a maximum of 8 hours per day, 40 hours per week, and 6 days per week. At all times during the school year, 14 and 15-year-olds are restricted to working from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. Even during school breaks, the earliest 14 and 15-year-old minors are able to start work is at 7 a.m. But during breaks, they can go until 9 p.m. And then in Maryland, employers are required to give their 14 and 15-year-old employees a 30-minute break or other non-working period for every 5 hours that they are scheduled. So if you have a minor on your schedule for 10 hours, obviously you would not for a 14, 15-year-old because that is prohibited. But you'll see this is the same rule that they have in place for 16 and 17-year-olds. But for example, for if you have a minor on the schedule for 10 hours, you'd be required to give them a 30-minute break every 5 hours of that schedule. So if they're only scheduled for 5 hours, at any time during those 5 hours, you would be required to give them a 30-minute break or other non-working period. For Virginia, as you'll see, the restrictions in Virginia are a little lighter across the board. Virginia does also require an age certification, not a work permit. And we will cover what an age certification is at the end. They also break up their regulations for 14 and 15-year-old employees into whether or not school is in session. So just like Maryland, during school, 14 and 15-year-olds may work a maximum of 3 hours per day, 18 hours per week, and six days every week. And then during break periods, so winter break, summer break, other times that school is out, the same as Maryland, 8 hours per day, 40 hours per week, 6 days per week. And at all times, whether school is in session or out of session, 14 and 15-year-olds in Virginia can work from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. Then finally, we'll go to DC. In Washington, DC, they also require a work permit for 14 and 15-year-old employees. In DC, 14 and 15-year-olds are only able to work 6 consecutive days. So rather than the restriction being on working 6 days in each 7-day week, in this case, the weeks may overlap, but 14 and 15-year-old employees may not work more than 6 consecutive days at any time. 14 and 15-year-olds in DC may work up to 48 hours per week, 8 hours per day. And then same as Maryland and Virginia, while school is in session, they may work from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. And then during summer or other breaks, they are able to work until 9 p.m. So next we'll go on to the topic of regulations and restrictions for 16 and 17-year-old employees in the DMV area. You can see here that the restrictions on 16 and 17-year-old minors are much lighter across the board than they are for 14 and 15-year-olds. This is to allow these minors to have more freedom to get a job, to make their own money, but also still to allow them ample time to fulfill their school responsibilities, to get ready to apply to college if that's the route they're taking, and to allow time for any extracurricular activities. So in Maryland, we'll start off with the restriction for 16 and 17-year-old minors is that for every day, these employees are allowed a maximum of 12 hours of work plus school. So if they are in school for 8 hours, then they are allowed at most 4 hours of work on top of that. This is to ensure that 16 and 17-year-olds have at least 8 hours per day committed to non-work, non-school activities. And then just like with 14 and 15-year-olds, for every 5 hours that 16 and 17-year-olds work, they must be given a 30-minute break or other non-working period. Moving on to Virginia, you can see Virginia has no employment restrictions for 16 and 17-year-old employees. So regardless of whether school is in session or not, 16 and 17-year-olds in Virginia are able to get a job where they can start their work day at any time, end their work day at any time. They can work as many hours as they like during the week. They can work as many days during the week as they like. And they can work as many hours during each day as they would like. So Virginia has no employment restrictions on 16 and 17-year-old employees. And then DC, just like with 14 and 15-year-olds, they restrict the work periods of 16 and 17-year-old employees to 6 consecutive days. So again, these weeks may overlap, but at no time can 16 and 17-year-olds work more than 6 consecutive days. They are also able to work a max of 48 hours per week and 8 hours per day. Unlike with the 14 and 15-year-olds, 16 and 17-year-olds in DC can work expanded hours, these hours being 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. And then finally, we will talk about work permits across the DMV. So in Maryland, for all minors under 18, so this includes both groups of 14 and 15 and 16 and 17-year-olds, a work permit is required for all employment. There is an exception for this for jobs outside of school hours where an employee may be working in a non-traditional job, such as cutting grass, setting up a lemonade stand, if that's something they want to do. Any other what we think of as non-traditional casual jobs, minors are not required to obtain a work permit for. In Virginia, you need to get a work permit for all employees under 16. Employees who are 16 or 17 years old in Virginia do not require a work permit for any job. To acquire a work permit in Virginia, there are 3 different documents that need to be submitted. One is a permission to employ. This is a form that is signed by the employee's parents, saying that they have given permission for the company to employ the minor. The company needs to submit a signed intent to employ form, which states that the company does have the intention of hiring the minor. And then a proof of age is required. This is required to be submitted along with the other 2 forms. They can use any government documents along with the proof of age form to verify that the employee is the age that they say they are, so that the company that is hiring them knows exactly what restrictions they must employ while that minor employee works for them. And then in DC, just like in Maryland, work permits are required for all employees under 18. Just like in Virginia, there are some additional forms needed in order to acquire a work permit. The first, similar to Virginia, is an intent to employ agreement signed by the business, stating that they do intend to hire the employee. And then also, just like Virginia, a proof or evidence of age document certifying that the minor is the age that they say they are, so that the business knows exactly which restrictions apply to them. And then unlike the other 2, DC also requires for any minor who intends to work during a vacation period, most commonly during the summer months when school is not in session, to acquire a vacation permit. So the work permit is required during the period in which school is in session. But if a minor wants to get a job during any vacation period from school, they're required to obtain a vacation permit. And the vacation permit has the same requirements as the work permit. They will be required to obtain a signed intent to employ form, as well as submit evidence of their age, again, so that the company knows exactly what restrictions apply to that minor employee. As you can see, a lot of the regulations around hiring and employing underage employees are very similar across all 3 states. The requirements are the same across a lot of areas. In general, Virginia tends to be the most lenient when talking about employing underage employees. And Maryland tends to be the most strict, with DC somewhere in the middle. They do share a lot in common among the regulations. They do have their differences. And it is important, as a business operating in the DMV, to know exactly what restrictions apply when you are hiring these underage employees, so as to protect your business from any legal action, as well as, to protect these underage employees, to make sure that, they are being treated fairly, they are being treated lawfully, they are given time to themselves outside of work for personal professional development. So I hope that this webinar today has taught you something new. If it has not taught you something new, I hope that it has reinforced the information you already knew. And if you would like to know more information about this or any other HR topics, You can enroll for future webinars, which we will be putting out across a variety of topics, as well as take advantage of our HR Direct service. Thank you for attending, and I hope everyone has a great day.